It's funny how sometimes you look at a calendar in a specific time, like a whole month even, just feels packed with history.
Absolutely. Like certain periods just become these super dense points where, I don't know, everything seems to happen at once for a nation.
Exactly, like crucial chapters all opening together. And that's what we're diving into today. We're zeroing in on one really significant month for one particular country, the month of May, in the history of Eritrea.
Right. And our roadmap for this is actually a specific text. It's titled Significance of May in the History of Eritrea, written by Simon Weldemikael.
Okay.
And it does just that. It pulls together several key dates, all falling in May, that are, well, incredibly important.
So our mission here really is to take these dates, these events that the source highlights, and sort of unpack them, see how they connect, what they tell us about the bigger picture, the long sweep of Eritrean history.
Yeah, giving you, the listener, a kind of shortcut to understanding these pivotal moments all through the lens of this 1 month, May.
It's about looking at the historical weight that May carries, using this text as our guide.
Okay, let's jump in. Where does the source start us off?
Well, it takes us back quite a way, back to the late 19th century, colonial expansion time.
Okay.
And the first date flagged is May Tech 1889. This is when the Italians occupied Karen.
Right, and the source points out this wasn't their first move. They had already grabbed the port city, Massawa, a few years earlier, 1885.
Okay.
So taking Karen up in the highlands was strategic. It was about pushing inland, consolidating power before they officially declared Eritrea an Italian colony.
Which happened when?
The very next year, 1890, so this May 1889 date, it's presented as a key marker of that initial Italian expansion taking root.
Got it. So the start of that colonial chapter, now fast forward quite a bit past the Italian era, the source highlights a moment when Eritrean political identity starts to really organize itself.
Yes, that brings us to May 5, 1941, and the text talks about the establishment of Maber Fikri Hagar,
Which means?
Association for the Love of Country, founded in Asmara.
And the timing is important here,
Yeah.
right? Just after the Italians were defeated and the British military administration was taking over.
Exactly. The source paints it as a time of, well, uncertainty, a political vacuum, maybe? A chance for Eritreans to step up after decades of Italian rule.
And what's so significant about this particular association?
Well, according to the text, it's considered the first truly national Eritrean political organization. It aimed, the source says, to represent the whole society.
The whole society.
Yeah. The text points to its leadership structure: 12 members, deliberately split evenly, 6 Christians, 6 Muslims, which was, a big deal for unity back then.
Wow, yeah. That sounds really foundational, laying the groundwork for later movements.
Definitely. The source frames it as the real beginning of organized political activism with Eritrean interests at its heart, uniting people, setting the stage for that long push towards self-determination.
Okay, so colonial beginnings, then the first seeds of national politics. What's the next May date the source brings up? It seems we're moving into the post-WWII era now.
We are. We jump to May 9, 1949. And this involves something the text calls the infamous Bevan-Sforza Plan.
Infamous. Strong word from the source. What was this plan?
It was a proposal cooked up by the UK and Italy about what to do with Italy's former colonies, Eritrea included, obviously.
And the plan was?
Stark, according to the source. It was to partition Eritrea, carve it up.
Just like that, how?
Most of it, the main highland areas, would go to Ethiopia, and the western province that was slated to be given to Sudan.
Wow. Okay. But how did Eritreans react, especially with groups like Marber Fikri Hagar already active?
Well, the source is very clear here. Massive opposition. Eritreans were already demanding full independence,
Right.
And this plan just ignored all that. The text uses phrases like colonial arrogance, injustice, basically trampling on self-determination.
Sounds like a real slap in the face to those early political efforts.
Absolutely. Now, the plan itself didn't actually go through international factors. Eritrean resistance stopped it. But the source stresses that Eritrea's future was still totally up in the air.
So what happened then?
This whole period led to the UN stemming in, and in 1950, under U.S. pressure, according to the source, the decision was made to federate Eritrea with Ethiopia.
Federation, not independence.
Right? And the source says this caused a lot of dissatisfaction. It argues this planted the seeds for the armed struggle that broke out later, especially after Ethiopia just annexed Eritrea outright in 1962, dissolving the federation.
Okay, that connection is really clear now, from international decisions to armed struggle. So let's shift into that struggle period. The source must highlight some May events there, too.
Oh, yes. It points to some pretty dramatic military actions. One in particular is May 21st, 1984.
What happened then?
This was an EPLF commando operation, EPLF, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. They hit the Ethiopian Air Force Base right in Asmara.
In the capital. Wow. And the source mentions a nickname for this.
It does. It calls it the miracle of 18 minutes.
18 minutes. Why?
Because that's apparently how long the core of the raid lasted. Just 18 minutes. And in that time, the source says they destroyed 33 Ethiopian military aircraft on the ground.
33 planes.
Yeah.
In 18 minutes. That's incredible.
It is. The source really emphasizes this as showcasing the EPLF's sophistication, their planning, their capability. It apparently really shocked the Ethiopian government, the Derg regime.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
A major blow to their air power.
Yeah, the text positions it as one of the most stunning commando missions of the entire war.
Definitely highlights the intensity of the fight, but the source also covers more tragic events from the struggle during May, doesn't it?
It does. There's the date, May 12th, 1988. This marks the Shiev massacre.
The source uses strong language here, too, calling it a heinous crime by the Ethiopian army. What's the context the text gives?
According to the source, this happened not long after the Ethiopian army suffered a huge defeat at Afrbet, a big EPLF victory in March 88. And the description in the text is brutal. It says the town of Shiev was basically wiped out, 400 civilians killed, women, children, the elderly.
That's horrifying.
The source cites eyewitness accounts saying survivors were rounded up and run over by tanks, others shot while trying to escape. It's a devastating account.
Absolutely. And the source connects this to a wider pattern.
Yes, it explains this wasn't isolated. It was part of a broader campaign targeting civilians during the war. The text says it's remembered as a symbol of that brutality and the immense sacrifices civilians made. And just to be clear, we're relaying what this specific source describes.
Understood. A very dark May memory.
Yeah.
Moving from that tragedy, though, the source brings us to the culmination, the end point of that long struggle. The biggest date of all, really.
May 24th, 1991, Independence Day.
Eritrea's Independence Day. And the source really tries to capture the scale of what led to this moment.
It does. It talks about half a century of struggle, political and armed. It mentions the cost, tens of thousands of civilian lives lost, huge destruction, and the sacrifice of 65,000 freedom fighters.
65,000 fighters. That's staggering.
The source calls it Africa's longest liberation war. And May 24th, 1991, marked that final victory, the liberation of Asmara, the end of the fighting. The answer, as the text puts it, to that long quest for decolonization.
A truly monumental day in Eritrean history.
Absolutely, the culmination of everything.
And then the formal international recognition wasn't too far behind.
Correct. The source notes May 28, 1993. That's when Eritrea officially joined the United Nations as its 182nd member.
So the world acknowledging its independence.
Exactly. That international stamp of approval.
Now, the source actually steps back slightly in time here, just after independence, but before the UN date, to note a significant loss.
Yes, on May 15, 1995, the source reports the death of Weldemikael. He passed away in Asmara at age 90.
And the text describes him as a giant figure, right? A founding father of the struggle.
Absolutely. A veteran nationalist leader. The source highlights his lifelong fight for independence, his strong opposition to annexation by Ethiopia, his work trying to unite Eritreans.
And it mentions something quite dramatic about his life.
Yeah, a really striking detail. The source includes he apparently survived 7 assassination attempts.
Oh, 7? That's incredible. Speaks volumes about the risks he took.
It really does. And the text emphasizes how important his writings and his radio broadcasts from exile were in shaping political thought and mobilizing people.
So his passing must have been a major moment for the new nation.
Huge. The source says there was deep mourning. He received a state funeral, buried at the Martyrs Cemetery. Clearly a deeply revered figure.
Okay, so the source covers these key figures too. But it doesn't end there, does it? It brings us into the post-independence era and, sadly, into another conflict.
That's right. It points to May 6, 1998.
And what happened on that date, according to the text?
The source states that Ethiopian forces crossed into Eritrean territory and attacked Eritrean units stationed there. It specifically mentions 6 members of the Eritrean Defense Forces were killed in this incident.
And this is identified by the source as the spark, the beginning of the Eritrean-Ethiopian War.
That's exactly how the text presents it. The start of that war, which it notes lasted until June 2000, involving really intense fighting on multiple fronts.
And it mentions the end of that war, too.
Briefly, yes. It mentions the Algiers Agreement signed in December 2000 and then a Boundary Commission ruling on the border in April 2002. Again, just reporting what the source lays out here about the start and resolution points.
Right. And staying within that war period, there's one more significant part. May date the source details.
Yes, May 12, 2000. According to the source, this is when Ethiopia launched its third major military offensive of the war against Eritrea.
And the outcome.
The source states this offensive was repulsed by the Eritrean Defense Forces. It describes this as one of the most intense phases of the war.
What was the goal of the offensive, according to the text?
The source claims Ethiopia mobilized a very large force, and the objective was to capture Asmara itself.
Capture the capital. That's ambitious.
Highly ambitious. The offensive apparently went on for weeks. But the text really stresses the strength of the Eritrean defense.
And the result, as the source sees it.
It states the Eritrean Defense Forces inflicted very heavy losses on the Ethiopian troops, effectively breaking their ability and will to keep fighting. The text argues that it was this decisive military outcome that compelled Ethiopia to accept the Algiers peace agreement soon after.
Okay. Again, that's the perspective presented in this source text.
Precisely.
So if we just step back and look at this collection of May dates our source, Simon Weldemikael, has pulled together, it's quite a journey, isn't it? From Italian occupation in 1889,
To the first political organizing in 41, the partition threat in 49,
then deep into the struggle, that incredible 84 raid, the awful 88 massacre.
culminating in independence in 91, UN entry in 93, losing a key leader in 95.
And then even marking the start and a key turning point of the later war in 98 and 2000. It really does create this intense, compressed timeline of modern Eritrea.
It absolutely does. The source effectively uses these May dates as anchor points to weave together this larger narrative. You get this condensed but still quite deep sense of the entire arc: colonization, resistance, struggle, independence, and then defending that independence.
Yeah, understanding these specific points as the source lays them out feels valuable. They aren't just random dates. They mark real shifts and pivotal moments.
Exactly. Transitions between eras. Imposition, reaction, struggle, achievement. And it's striking how many of these crucial moments, both highs and lows, seem to cluster in this one month, May.
It paints this picture of resilience, maybe. Starting under occupation in May, organizing in May, facing threats in May, winning freedom in May, defending it in May.
That's a great way to put it. The source, by focusing on May, highlights that cyclical nature the challenges faced and the determination shown, all echoed within the single month across decades.
So we've walked through these significant May dates in Eritrean history, using Simon Weldemikael's text, Significance of May in the History of Eritrea, as our guide.
And it really shows the power of this approach, doesn't it? Focusing on specific dates compiled like this can really illuminate the complexity and the trajectory of a nation's past.
It definitely leaves you thinking. I mean, consider how much history, how much struggle and sacrifice and triumph can be packed into the events tied to just 1 month for one country, as this source shows us.
Right. It makes you wonder about the sheer density of history everywhere, maybe history we miss if we don't zoom in sometimes.
And poses that bigger question, what other stories, maybe for different places or times, could we understand better just by looking at the events clustered in a single month? A really interesting lens this text provides.
A fascinating way to approach history, for sure.
A lot to mull over. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.